Hi, and welcome to a Power Up Your Business webinar sponsored by Skew Food. My name is Peter Chapman.
And I'm Gary Morton.
We'd like to welcome you this afternoon and thank you for joining us today for this informative webinar about how to raise your prices in the food industry. Perhaps we should start by just telling you a little bit about ourselves before we get going here today. My name is Peter Chapman, and I've been working in the food industry for approximately 30 years. I started working at a store in high school and continued on to work with Loblaw companies. Approximately 19 years working in different departments, responsible for merchandising in a number of the fresh departments. And following my departure from Loblaws, I started my own business and have been doing consulting work in the food industry ever since, trying to help producers and processors understand the retailers, and really enjoy the opportunity to help people understand the retailers better and try and develop products and programs that meet their needs and drive their sales.
And I'm Gary Morton, and I've been working in the agri-food industry and agriculture industry for probably close to 30 years now, or over 30 years. And I have worked with people developing new products, new ideas, and been on the buyer supplier side of the table, or on the supplier side of the table for many times and often. And this is why we're really concerned about trying to bring some of this information to you. And this is why we've created Skew Food. We're just having a little trouble with our PowerPoint presentation at the moment.
And there we are. So now you get a chance to see what we look like. So we're just going to flip back to the PowerPoint now. I'm Peter Chapman with the black shirt.
And I'm Gary Morton. Okay, here we are with the agenda. We've got a lot to talk about raising your prices, and we're really trying to help you with show you some things that you may not be aware of, and that's why we put this presentation together. There's a lot of stuff happening around prices today, a lot of information floating around, and a lot of concerns. So what we'd like to do is talk to you today about what's happening today. We'd also like to talk about the facts, like give you all the facts that you need to build a good strategy for pricing. We want to talk about the value that you're delivering and the relationships you're going to build or have with your customers. And then finally, we're going to give you 7 strategies to raise your prices. So what's happening today, Peter?
Well, there's a lot happening in the industry today, Gary, and a lot of it is impacting this issue about raising prices. Last fall, Loblaw sent a message out to the supplier community, and the message was that they expected to see prices start to come down. And it was a strongly worded message that they felt we had been seeing too many price increases and they wanted to see some of those reversed. Also in the industry, we've had a lot of inflation. We've seen categories like beef climb substantially year over year. And we were going through months where food inflation in Canada was at levels that we had not seen for a while, so 3, 4, 5% year over year. And we also know that there's a battle for market share going on in our Canadian grocery industry, that we see Walmart and Costco continuing to gain share, which is coming at the expense of some of the other retailers, the traditional retailers. So when market share is changing back and forth, there's always a battle. And part of that is related to price. So what we have experienced this summer is Loblaw companies sent a letter to some of their suppliers which said, if you are going to continue to ship to us after September 4th, we will be taking a deduction of 1.45%. And there was wording in that letter about unjustified cost increases and that kind of thing. And since Loblaw sent that letter out, we've also seen some other wholesalers follow suit with that. So all those things are going on in the industry today, and they're really something that all of you need to be aware of because they're impacting how we operate.
So what this does is it creates a different environment, a new climate. That environment is changing that you've been used to. So what does it mean to you?
Well, the first thing for me is that the world of sort of the old world, when I think back to my days with Loblaw, and we would have suppliers come in for an annual meeting and we would talk about pricing, and prices would change, and somebody would say, well, I need to put the price up 2%, and there wasn't as much conversation about why or how it was that these things happen. And I know we kind of think about that as the good old days, but I really think it's important for people to understand that you just can't do that anymore. The days of coming in and saying, well, I need to put my price up by 2%, they're just gone. And the fact is that your customers, the retailers, they expect you to be more diligent about pricing. And if you do come in and just say you need to put your price up 2%, you're really doing more to damage that relationship than you are to help it.
So to a large degree, this is creating some mistrust between suppliers and retailers, Peter?
I think it definitely is creating mistrust. We're seeing a wider gap than we've ever seen before between suppliers and retailers on this pricing issue. And I mean, for sure, it's always been a negotiation. If I think back, the retailer always felt they were paying too much, and the suppliers always felt like they weren't getting enough. But we seem to be in a new world now where the gap is wider and this level of mistrust is greater than it used to be.
So it's not really a new thing, is it, Peter?
No, it's not new, but perhaps just a heightened level of mistrust.
So for some people, it's almost like a line in the sand, though, right?
It's always been a line in the sand, but perhaps recently we've seen that line moved, and that's got people upset. There's no doubt that suppliers are upset about this. They feel that Loblaw is not treating them fairly, and that the other retailers, who have followed suit, that it isn't fair. So I think that's why it's important for us to talk about it and try to figure out how to deal with it.
So is everyone in the same boat, like in this thing?
We are. We're all in one big boat here. There's certainly a list of suppliers who received the letter from Loblaw, but what's so important for everybody to understand, it doesn't matter what category you're in, what department you operate in, there is just such a heightened awareness around pricing in the industry. And whether Loblaw or the other retailers will be deducting off your invoice in September, it's so important that everybody knows that we're working in this environment now.
Yeah, so so whether you're being impacted by this letter or this change that's taking place or not, the whole environment is changing. It
is, and I think you have to consider yourself, if you're a supplier in the industry, whether you received the letter or not, that you received the letter.
Yeah.
You get the message.
So understand your business, and you have and the market better than you ever have. It's something that you've got to do today, right?
That's true, Gary. There's so much focus now about pricing and the different components of costing that you really need to make sure that you understand, first of all, what's going on within your own business, and you also need to understand what's going on in the store with retail pricing.
So you need to know what's going on in your category as well. You've got to understand what your competitors are up to. It's really like you just can't put your product out there and hope something's going to happen. You got to have a plan now, right?
You need a plan, and the suppliers who understand their business and understand the market better certainly have the best chance of getting a price that they believe is fair for their product.
So knowledge is really power here.
It is, and it's important to keep that in mind, and it's part of this foundation that you need to build so that you can get the prices you want.
So basically you can see that the environment is changing, the climate's changing, the thinking's changing. So you've got to actually be prepared for that if you want to look at addressing your price issues.
That's right, and business evolves, and this is an opportunity for people to look at perhaps doing business a slightly different way, and in the end, a more effective way.
I think it was Mark Twain who said, "Get the facts first, and you can distort them later." This is really an important thing where you have to get the facts right. I remember when I first worked in farm business management, I went out and I talked to carrot producers, and I talked to the first carrot producer and I said, what's your cost of production? He said $250 an acre. I'm just pulling that number out of the air right now. But then I went along to the next farmer and I said, what's your cost of production for carrots? And he said, $250 an acre. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. The first guy knew his costs really well. The second guy seems to know his costs pretty good. By the time I got to the third guy, I asked the question, like, what's your cost of production for carrots per acre? And the guy said $250. And I said, do you mind me asking where this number comes from? Because I've just had the past 2 other people tell me the same number. And he says, it's easy. This specialist came down from Ontario and he told us that the cost of production was $250 an acre. And this is what everybody was using. And you know that no 2 farms have the same cost of production, or no 2 food producers have the same cost of production. So you have to get the facts straight. So we're going to dive into the facts a little bit here. So you have to understand your costs.
We have on the screen, there's 3 photos there, and the one on the left is there to represent your packaging. And packaging is such an important component of any food product, whether it be a commodity or a value-added product. So you really need to focus on that component and tear apart your packaging and say, A, does it do what it needs to do? And am I getting the value out of my packaging? And you can see the photo we have there is some grape tomatoes, which I think is a really innovative package, which looks like a mason jar, and it's a really neat looking bag. But the question that supplier has to satisfy themselves with is, am I getting the value, am I getting the payback out of the investment I'm making in probably a much more expensive package than perhaps just a regular clamshell or or a small bag for those grape tomatoes. So what is your cost per case on packaging? Is it realistic? Is it higher or lower than your competitor?
And in the center picture, we're talking about distribution here, like the big numbers, like what are the big numbers in distribution, and what are the costs of getting a product to your customer, and are there ways that you can reduce those costs? Because these are the kind of things, like, you need to know the cost per case to get it into that distribution system. And it's really what we're talking about is the costs in the total value chain here, and how do we tighten them up?
So all these different components are things that you should understand and make sure that you know those metrics in your business, and that you can talk to your customer about them. Because if you're looking for a change in your price, you need to be the expert at your costs.
And labor's obviously, you can see on the right-hand side here, is obviously a big cost. It's one of your biggest costs. And, are you managing it properly? Are you getting the most out of it that you can? And I know everybody would say that they probably are, but these are the things you've got to start to look through the whole chain here, like from your packaging to your distribution to your labor. Are these costs under control, and are they justifiable?
Another big component of your cost is ingredients. And we all know that we take pride in the products we produce, and that there's a lot of thought and effort goes into making these products. And sometimes we also get a little bit close to them, and we have ingredients that we feel are critical to the production of the product. So when was the last time you took a hard look at that and said, are they the right ingredients? Am I paying too much for some things? Because we all have a role within the value chain to manage the cost, which ultimately results in the final price to the consumer. So ingredients are another thing that you should look at your cost per case and understand, and be able to articulate when changes are happening. If you're in a market where commodity costs are impacting your ingredient costs, then you need to be able to talk to your customer about those and deal with the facts on that issue.
It's the same with production and your processing. Really the goal here is, how do we try to push prices up, at the same time push our costs down, so that we can get the margin in there that we need, or we can grow that margin as much as possible.
Now, here are 2 cost components which, in my opinion, have created a big part of the mistrust that we're seeing with retailers and suppliers. So we see that on the left is the shot of the fuel price, and that's really created a big problem in the industry, because we saw fuel prices skyrocket and we all had to try to absorb cost increases because of that. And often those were passed on in a price increase, which is justified. But since then, we've seen the price of fuel subside. And unfortunately, there's this level of mistrust is created, because the retailer's perception is that they absorbed a cost increase because the price of fuel went up so high, but now that it has returned to a lower level, has the cost changed to reflect that? And then the second thing would be currency. We know that we've had some big fluctuations between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. And again, some of these justified cost increases, but if the Canadian dollar changes relative to the US dollar, will the cost to the retailer change? And those are two of the biggest issues that are facing the industry right now. So hard to quantify. I mean, it's so difficult to really be able to nail it down, because there's a lot of factors that play. But it is important to know that those are causing some issues.
So the facts, and what we're trying to do with the facts here, is to help you build a case of why your price is where it is. And, you know, understanding the cost, the labor rate, for example, your labor costs, you know, could be huge, and there could be changes in your labor costs. For example, you know, what if your cost of labor increases, or the minimum wage goes up? You know, a labor rate, you know, is, if we said the labor rate increases by 5% and labor represents 20% of your cost, then it would be realistic to be looking for a 1% increase in your price.
And there's other cost components, such as, excuse me, hydro, labor, distribution, where your cost relative to another producing region, could be within Canada, could be outside of Canada, could be very different. So when you're discussing these issues with your customer, you need to be very knowledgeable about what you pay relative to what your competition is paying somewhere else. So make sure you get the facts.
And like we said, there's that impact of the fuel and the currency, like of 2016 versus 2015. And have you adjusted your costs? And it could go either way. Your value.
Such an important component. And what we really want to share, again, as we're building this foundation for you to implement some strategies, is that when you look at your value, it's your value relative to your customer. So where do you add value to the retailer? And then finally, where do you add value to the consumer? Often we put so much blood, sweat, and tears into the things that we grow or produce or process that we lose sight of what impact it really has on the person or the entity who's buying the product, the retailer, and also the consumer, to get them to pick it up at the store.
So you can see with value to your customer, there's all kinds of different things that we're looking at here. The service level that's offered, the shrink, the sell-through, you know, the traffic in a particular store, the margins that are expected, the low maintenance costs, incremental sales, you know, the safety of the food, consistency, and innovation.
And all these things, it's important to look at these different attributes from the perception of your customer. So if the retailer expects that shrink in your item should be 5% or less, what are you really at? Are you at 10 or are you at 2? Because I've seen examples of both, and the retailer's perception of your product and the value you bring is really influenced by how you perform in these different attributes. And there may be some that are unique to your category. I mean, you know, if you're in seafood, for example, perhaps sustainable sourcing would be something that would be on that, but that would be specific to that category. So challenge your business to really understand, what value am I bringing to the retailer? And often, again, we love our products, we get so close to them, we think they're fantastic, which is great. But you really have to look at it and say, when it's on the shelf, what value is it bringing to the retailer?
And you've got to remember that you have both the customer and there's the consumer, that's the end consumer that's using your product. So there's different values at both levels. So to the consumer, for example, the value could be around the eating experience. You know, about the value of their value of home life, the convenience that's offered, health and wellness, food safety. You know, is the food local? Does the food offer a solution for them? Is it solving some kind of problem? Or, you know, there's also global food opportunities that they have. So they have so many more choices than they ever had before. So is somebody just going to buy local?
That's right. And it's really, local is such a great topic because we have a lot of people who say they want that, which is great. But when they get to the shelf, is that really how they make the buying decision? So you need to know how consumers buy in your category. And I think it's good to just take a moment to explain a couple of these terms here, Gary, because when we talk about them. So eating experience for me, I mean, for the most part here, we're selling food. It's got to taste good, right?
Right.
So for me, objectively, how does your product perform? And when we say home life, does your product stand up and do what it's supposed to do after the consumer takes it home? If you're in a frozen food environment, for example, is your product holding up in the freezer for 4 months or 6 months or whatever the consumer expects? It's not what we think, it's what the consumer's expectation is. So really take a look at the different attributes of your product and decide, you know, am I really delivering the goods to the consumer? Because again, they're the one who makes that decision, and if it doesn't sell, it won't stay. So.
And if there's no benefit to them in the end, or it's not solving some kind of problem that they have with food, then it'll probably fade away from that marketplace, and it's not really as interesting to your customer.
That's right.
As well.
The consumer picking it up is what drives the value with the customer. And it's the same thing when we're talking about price increases, that a retailer is much more likely to want to entertain a change in the price if your product is delivering all these things that the consumer is looking for.
So relationships, everybody knows that relationships are probably something you have to build and be strong with, but you know, you need to be able to go out there and build a relationship with your buyer, and meeting with them once a year is not going to build a relationship.
No, it's not, Gary, and it's unfortunate because it is tough to get to see retailers, and often when we want to have meetings with them and they're too busy to see us and that kind of thing. So my suggestion is that you find some of those opportunities outside of the regular meetings to build this relationship. So if you have an opportunity to go to an industry event, take advantage of it. The photo on the top right in our slide there is from a recent CPMA, Canadian Produce Marketing Association town hall, and it was conducted in a community hall in PEI, and the industry members were invited. There was representation from all the major retailers there. There was actually the Federal Minister of Agriculture. So if you wanted to have a conversation about the produce industry, or you were a grower, you can't get that kind of opportunity anywhere else. And so you have to try to take advantage of them. And we also put a picture of a store up there because you really need to share your in-store experiences with your customers to develop the relationship. As Gary mentioned, you can't do that in one meeting a year. You need to look for opportunities to do it and share your experiences with them. And
you need to build relationships in good times and bad. You need to be there when things aren't going good for your buyer as well, and in support of all those kind of things. And take the time to go out to some of these industry events and participate. I mean, it is your industry. It is a profession. And you need to get out and around and create those opportunities where you can build that relationship. You can know people, learn to know people outside of just that regular meeting. So those are really our three core issues to build this foundation before we can talk about the strategies for trying to raise your prices. It's so important that we're dealing with the facts in our industry today. It's also really, really important that we have those relationships that you can use to have the conversation when you need to, and finally to focus on the value that you bring to your customer and the consumer. So before we delve into the strategies, and we've got 7 strategies to share with you today on raising prices, we just wanted to share a little bit about SKUfood.com with you. And Peter and I got together and created SKUfood.com within the past 6 months. And the reason is that we saw a lot of things going on in the industry, a lot of people struggling with issues in the food industry, dealing with buyer-supplier relationships, dealing with building their products, dealing with getting them to market. And we wanted to bring it all together in one place where we could help people overcome some of those issues.
So we're excited to share some of these types of information with you today. These are the kind of things that you'll see from skufood.com. And if you have a chance, we'd appreciate you checking out the website. And we're always open to listening to what people in the industry are saying. So if there's something you're looking for, or you want to get some information about it, by all means, give us a call, and we'll give you our contact information at the end. And this
webinar is, we're going to be doing more of them. Is basically what we're saying is we picked this issue today to. It's a topical issue. It's one of the ones that people are talking about. But any issue that you see that or that you have that you'd like us to talk about or research and find some answers for you, present it to us and send us an email, and we'll be glad to do that in a webinar. Strategies.
This is good stuff, right?
This is the rubber hits the road.
So we're going to offer 7 strategies for you today to help you raise your prices in the food industry. So the first strategy for you is that you have to work in advance. You cannot just go into a meeting anymore and say, oh, here's my new cost. You need to lay the groundwork for a cost increase or a price change far in advance. So there's lots of ways you can do that. If you see, say perhaps you see a category manager or somebody at an industry event, and you drop a little bit of a hint to say, oh, did you notice that our minimum wage is increasing in the fall? Or I was trying to negotiate my packaging costs for next year, and it looks like I'm going to have to absorb a 5% increase. Or those are the kind of things. And it's trying to drop those little tidbits to make your customer knowledgeable about what you're trying to do before you come in and actually give them the number of what your price has to change by.
And this whole process helps them not get surprised, I guess, more than anything. Like, so that you're not dropping a bomb on them at one time, that they know something that's coming, they know what the issues that you're facing, and you're basically also helping to arm them so that they can actually help defend your price, right?
Sure, there's a lot of pressure on the category managers to deliver the right cost. So if you can provide them with the information to go back to their boss, and if their boss says, well, why did you accept a cost increase from supplier A? Well, they need the ammunition to be able to defend their decision to do that. So you need to provide that to them ahead of time. And what success really is that when you go to have a meeting with them about costing, that they already understand that the cost is going to have to change for you to stay in business and be successful and continue to do what you've been doing.
Use the facts and logic. So,
well, we talked a lot about facts at the beginning of the webinar, where we explored things like your cost per case on distribution, labor, ingredients, production, and packaging. So what I would really encourage you to do, and to me this is a critical strategy for you going forward, is explore your top 5 cost components. What really makes up the cost of goods that you have in your product?
Because what we find is, working over the years, is how few people actually know their cost, really truly know their cost of production, or the cost per case of product, or their cost per package of product. And it's often fewer than you think.
If you were to take the different SKUs that you produce, can you take your costs, say perhaps your case cost is $20. Do you really know that $4 of that is labor and $3 is distribution and down the line? And as Gary said, in our experience, it's not an easy thing to do. A lot of your businesses are complicated, and we respect that. But if you want to go in and have a fact-based conversation with your customer, you need to know your business inside and out. So what we encourage you to do is to explore those top 5 cost components, track what that's been over the last 3 years. What's happening to these in your business over the last 3 years, and then try to forecast them for the next year. And we appreciate, again, that's not easy to forecast these things. I mean, if you know what's going to happen to the price of oil or the Canadian dollar, maybe making a food product is the wrong job for you. Maybe you need to get into the finance industry, but try to understand where these cost components are going, especially with packaging. Labor is something that is becoming more predictable as minimum wage rates are more legislated and looking further out. So try to figure out so that you can start to share some of these with your customers.
And you have to take this logical approach to this, because you can't rely on hope. Hope isn't a strategy, and you've got to sort of have a plan of, this is based on our facts and our logic of where we're going forward. So you also have to be realistic. And, you know, coming in and asking for the moon is not always going to work.
No, it doesn't work anymore. And I don't think it ever worked, to be honest with you. We need to be realistic about what these numbers should be. We do have to leave room to negotiate, because you need to give them that opportunity to maybe bring it back a little bit. So we put there, know who you're negotiating with. So if you have a category manager and you know that they really only feel happy when they go home at night and that they could get your cost down by 50 cents, well, then you need to understand that when you go in trying to negotiate a 20-cent cost increase, you probably need to ask 70 and let them bring it back by 50, which is it's a crazy way to do business, but that's the way it is sometimes. Another point on this is that you can't procrastinate, because I've seen examples sometimes where people don't get the cost increase and then their business is in a very bad place because they're not generating what they need to generate. So you need to make sure that you continue to stay on top of this. And one question people might have would be, well, Peter, the retailers are telling me that costs can't change. And I think that's a broad message that they're trying to send to industry. And they may go out and say that, but the reality is, if you sit down and have a fact-based conversation, then they have to understand, if truly costs are changing within your business, that there has to be some kind of movement. And the last point there for me is one strategy, and some of you might think we're crazy here, but sometimes you need to drop your price. So if an item in your arsenal makes up, say, 10% of your sales, and you know that the components have changed, or you've been able to generate some efficiencies, or somehow you're able to give them a price decrease. I've seen it before, and although it takes a minute because you got to pick the category manager up off the floor, but if you can offer them something, sometimes it goes so much to changing that relationship, because then they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, this is more of a two-way relationship right now, as opposed to one where we have to always dictate things. So whether you subscribe to this as being a good idea or not, it's your business. You can choose to do what you wish. But I know that in terms of trying to, change that level of trust, then sometimes if you had the opportunity, it has a big impact on your relationship.
And in reality, you're not going to win every time you try to get a price increase.
No, you're not. Nope.
Strategies for raising your price. Focusing on the value to the customer. And this is extremely important. What's that value offer that you're delivering? What's your unique selling proposition? What is the real value that you are bringing to that customer?
So if you look at the screen, we've put what we call a customer value matrix on the screen. And what we've done is we've taken the different attributes. If you think back to our slide previously about where you bring value to the customer, we've listed all these attributes on the left-hand side. So service level, shrink, sell-through, and so on. These are the things that we see as being important to your customer, to the retailer. Then you can assign a weight to them, and it has to add up to 100, and every category could be different. We've assigned 20% of the weight to service level for our example here. Perhaps this could be an item where it's hard to get to product, so perhaps service level would maybe be 40% if it was something that was really in demand. If you think 2 or 3 years ago to when kale exploded, or cauliflower last year, or something like that, service level might even be higher. But anyway, we weight them, and it has to add to 100. And then the next column, you can see where it says rank your business. So you need to give your business a ranking out of 10. And you have to be objective about this. And so you can see for our example, we've rated our business an 8 out of 10 on service level, so on down, and in terms of store traffic. So if your item gets advertised, does it bring people into the store? Does it drive store traffic for your customer? If the answer is yes, it's great for that. People come in looking for it, then you give yourself a 10 out of 10. And in the next column over that's titled Your Business, you can see that the spreadsheet calculates for you based on the weight and the rank. And in our business here, we scored an overall 78.5 out of 100. And if it was an ideal business, you can see how it would score, and then it lists for you where the opportunity would be. So if I was taking a look at this business, I would say we have an issue on service level, shrink, and sell-through. That's causing us to really have a lower score. So those are areas where I would try to address within the business. And if I was going back looking to change my pricing level with the retailer, then I would talk about those issues. It's not that you want to show them this matrix, it just helps you focus where you need to in your business and bring those things forward. Because chances are, if they show up here as being an opportunity, then your customer probably perceives them as an opportunity too.
Focus on the value to your consumer. And we had pointed out before that your customer is different than the consumer, that the customer is the one you're actually selling to, but the consumer is the end consumer of this product.
So we've done the same matrix for the consumer here, and we've taken the attributes that we had listed on our slide earlier that we discussed, and we've given them a weight. And again, it's all dependent on the category you compete in. Eating experience might be 50% in a prepared food category. And then you rank your own products, and you get a score for your business. And again, this is where you can focus and try to make improvements to your products, which put you in a better position to have a conversation about pricing with your customer. If your product scores a 10 out of 10 all the way down this chart, then chances are the consumer is going to be picking it up, and you are in a stronger position to talk to the customer about pricing because your product is selling, consumers are talking about it, they're coming in looking for it, and it sells, which is, at the end of the day, the food industry is about moving cases, and that's where your customer is going to be much more likely to listen to you than if your product is struggling to sell.
So number 6 is you've got to work tirelessly to develop these relationships. So what we're suggesting here is that you find 6 opportunities over the next 12 months where you can go out and strengthen some of your buyer-supplier relationships.
Find chances that are not 100% business, but where you can really, have a quick conversation about things and lay the groundwork, like we talked about in the first strategy, is to work ahead. So find these opportunities to develop that relationship. Oftentimes we're working with suppliers and there's so much sort of focus and anticipation put into this one meeting a year. Whereas if you can try and spread that conversation out over 6 opportunities in the next 12 months, then it makes the meeting so much more effective. So that doesn't come without work. You have to explore where the opportunities are, position yourself properly to be able to have a conversation, make sure you know who the right players are. There's lots of great opportunities, industry events, that kind of thing, but you have to make a conscious effort to be there. And if you feel that you're too busy to be at these events, we were talking about that, and that's one of the reasons we created SKU Food, is to try and help you have a well-run business so that you can then participate in some of those events.
And we want to
build a relationship.
And to bring you the resources and the things together that you need to help better price in this case. So on top of it all, you've got to try to keep a level playing field, and that's a building trust issue. And it's not, it's basically, you're not going to be the same with everybody, but or you're not going to be equal with everybody, but you're going to be fair with everybody.
That's right, and we don't always have to give everybody 50 cents a case or $1 a case off. Maybe $1 a case to one customer could be the value of that would be in a different format to another customer. For example, participating in a program that they're trying to launch or build, or their control label program, or their loyalty program, for example. So there's different ways that you can participate with your customers. And again, they don't always have to be the same, but do keep it equal. Because if your customer perceives that you're giving something to the other retailer and not to them, then you will have a very hard time ever getting to have a conversation about price, because there will be this built-in mistrust in the back of their mind.
So there you go. We've kind of covered a lot of things today, and I hope you find some of them useful in trying to raise your prices. But we've talked about what's happening today. We've talked about the facts and your relation, or your value, relationships you build with your customers, and we've talked about 7 strategies.
So for me, it's so important to build that foundation with the facts, the value, and the relationships with your customers. Those 3 components are very important things in your food business that you've got to constantly be focusing on. And then you can take those 7 strategies, which we articulated, which were to work in advance, use the facts and the logic, be realistic about the price increase you're trying to get, focus on your value to the customer, focus on your value to the consumer, work tirelessly to develop those relationships, and finally, to make sure that you keep it a level playing field. And with those 7 strategies, we've got to start to, we hope that you see some change. And we appreciate that it's tough, and that when we get these notes and conversations with retailers which just say, no, we're not talking about cost increases. Well, the way I approach that conversation is, we're not talking about a cost increase today, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about something down the road. And we have to get to a point in this industry where we can have productive conversations about costs, and it has to go both ways. And the other thing I would encourage you to do is always spend some time in the store and look at your category in the store. As a consumer, would you buy the products the way that they're priced? And just have a look and see, are we delivering value through the entire value chain? And we all have a responsibility. The retailers have drawn a line in the sand here and made a statement about this. So we all have to look at where our point in the value chain is, and perhaps there's some opportunities to take costs out sometimes. And as Gary and I were talking, a static selling price with a lower cost of production is actually like making more money.
Yeah. So there's lots of different ways to look at this. So finally, just to wrapping up, that's pretty much our presentation for today, but we would like to take a few minutes to talk to you about SKU Food, our online community for food producers and food processors. And SKUfood.com is jam-packed with information to help you grow that bottom line. So there's lots of free things there if you actually go to SKUfood.com, and we actually have a membership site there as well.
That's right. The membership site that we've created, I mean, for only $297 a year, which is really not a lot of money in the big scheme of things, but it's great value there. And once people join as a member, it opened up the door to a lot more information, which we've packed into our SKU Food Vault. And Gary and I have put a lot of the things in there that we've learned over the industry. There's several different components there. There's information to help you with developing products. There's information to help you with your business, to help you as a manager in the food industry. And what we're so excited about with SKUfood.com is that it's built directly for people in the food industry. It's not that we're taking leadership things from somewhere else, or that we're taking process things from somewhere else. We've developed it specifically for people in the food industry. And that's why we're so excited, because we can't find any resource like it anywhere else. So we've had a great time working on the development of it, and we're going to continue to add to it every week.
And our focus is to put dollars to your bottom line. And we're looking at how can you, we're looking at adding new things constantly to this. We have a podcast lined up that we're going to start doing that and interviewing really interesting people for this sector. We have workshops that are coming along. We have more webinars that are here for sure. And another thing is we're going to have a community inside just for members where people can talk and share their ideas with industry peers.
And a special bonus just for you today for participating on the webinar with us. And we do really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day, because we appreciate that you're very busy. Everyone who works in the food industry works hard. I think no matter where you're at in the chain, whether you're a producer or a processor, and believe it or not, even the retailers work hard. So we do understand that you're busy and an hour is valuable to you. So we thank you for being here with us today. And as a special bonus, if you're not already a member of skewfood.com, that if you join by the end of tomorrow, we'd be happy to spend an hour on the phone with you, and we could set it up on Skype, or we could have a call, and you can just talk to us about your business, and we'll provide some insights to you and take our 60 odd years of experience and put it into play for you, and try to help you grow your bottom line.
So we encourage you to go to skewfood.com or give Peter or Gary an email or a call, and we'd be glad to talk to you. And if we can figure out how to do this, we're going to take some questions.
Unfortunately, we can't seem to see the questions.
Yes, we're having trouble seeing our questions. I don't know if maybe if you type them in a little box down on the bottom right-hand side, maybe we can see one, but we've had a little bit of problem technology-wise today. So, well, if we can't do this, I guess what we're going to say is...
well, I think what we would say is that we'd be happy if you send us an email. Our email is on the screen there. It's peter@skewfood.com or gary@skewfood.com. And we'd be happy, we would certainly get back and answer your questions, give you the best advice that we can. Or if you want to call, I mean, my number is 902-489-2900. And Gary's number is 902-670-3992. And as I said earlier, we're always happy to talk to people in the industry. So we apologize we can't do any questions on the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Or if you have a suggestion for a future topic, I mean, we have some ideas ourselves based on our understanding of the industry, but we would really like to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our customers. And we have to make sure we follow that philosophy. When we tell you, you got to understand your customer, we have to understand ours. So if you have any ideas or suggestions for an upcoming webinar, we'd be happy to entertain them, and look forward to, again, sharing some more industry information soon.
And we really hope we see you inside at Skew Food.
That's right. Come and check us out, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks now.